Have you ever quietly moved to another room at night and called it kindness, when really you just didn't know how to explain what was happening to your own body? I did, for 18 months, and it nearly cost us something we would never have gotten back. I'm 83, and my wife and I share a bed again, every single night. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly what changed that. These days, I sleep beside my wife every night, no exceptions, no guest room. I've started reaching for her hand without thinking about it, something that had quietly stopped happening during those 18 months without either of us noticing exactly when. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because I nearly accepted permanent separate rooms as simply how this chapter of our marriage was going to look. It started slowly enough that neither of us named it directly. I'd get up at midnight, again near 2, and by the third time I was worried more about waking her than about my own exhaustion. So I started sleeping down the hall, telling myself it was temporary, a kindness rather than a retreat. Temporary turned into 18 months. She never complained, not once, which somehow made it worse. I'd catch her looking at the guest room door sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite name, and I think we both understood what she was actually thinking, even though neither of us said it out loud. I told myself I was protecting her sleep, which was true as far as it went, but I think I was also protecting myself from having to explain something I didn't understand well enough to explain. It's easier to just quietly move down the hall than to sit across from the person you love and say, honestly, I don't know why this is happening to me. 52 years married, and that 18 months was the longest stretch we'd ever spent not sharing a bed. Longer than any illness, any trip, any fight we'd ever had. I don't think either of us said that number out loud until much later, once it was already behind us. Counting it up afterward, honestly, felt like grief for something we hadn't even realized we'd lost while we were losing it. I assumed it was simply my bladder failing with age, the same way eyesight fades or hair thins, an inevitable subtraction with nothing to be done about it. I never once connected it to anything happening earlier in the day, hours before I ever got into bed. Here's what nobody explained to me. A meaningful share of nighttime urination isn't actually about the bladder or the prostate directly. During the day, especially if you sit for long stretches, fluid pools in your lower legs due to gravity and reduced circulation. The moment you lie down flat to sleep, that pooled fluid redistributes back into your bloodstream, and your kidneys process it as extra urine right when you're trying to stay asleep. It's a plumbing problem of timing, not of failure. That near acceptance is exactly what reframed everything for me. The redistribution of fluid at night is one of the most well-documented and correctable drivers of frequent urination in older adults. It's not a mystery of aging. It's basic physics that responds directly to timing. For 11 years, the bathroom ran my nights. Up at midnight, up at 2, up again at 5, a weak little stream each time and never quite empty. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, knowing I'd drag through the next day half awake. I thought it was just age. It wasn't. Here's what no one ever sat me down to explain. The prostate crowds the channel your urine runs through, so the bladder never fully drains. It just fills right back up within the hour. That's why you go and go again. It was never weakness. It was never getting old. And the pills they kept handing me, they left me dizzy every time I stood, gave me that strange, dry finish where almost nothing came, and the nights never changed. But there is a gentle way to help that bladder empty the way it's meant to, without any of that. At 83, I finally sleep through the night again. I'll show you exactly what in this video, and if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So here's what actually changed things. I started elevating my legs above the level of my heart for about 20 to 30 minutes in the late afternoon, several hours before bed. The mechanism is straightforward. Instead of that pooled fluid redistributing into my bloodstream while I'm trying to sleep, it redistributes earlier while I'm sitting in a chair with a book, and my body has hours to process it normally before bedtime ever arrives. I paired it with cutting off fluids about 2 to 3 hours before sleep, not eliminating water, just moving the timing. I want to be honest that this felt almost too simple when I first read about it. 20 minutes with my feet up on a stack of pillows, watching the evening news, hardly seemed like the kind of thing that could undo 18 months of separate bedrooms. I gave it real time anyway, because I'd run out of other ideas. Within the first week, I noticed one fewer trip most nights. By week 3, most nights I was only up once, if at all. I remember the exact evening I decided to actually move back into our bedroom, rather than just quietly testing whether I could get through one more night down the hall. It felt like a bigger decision than it should have, given how small the actual habit change had been. I sat on the edge of our bed for a minute before saying anything, and when I finally told her I wanted to move back in, she just nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to say it out loud for longer than either of us wanted to admit. I added the rest of a small system around it. Less caffeine and alcohol in the evening specifically, since both act as bladder irritants and diuretics on top of the fluid redistribution. A short walk most mornings, which helps circulation move fluid through my legs more efficiently throughout the day, instead of letting it pool as much in the first place. None of these pieces would have mattered as much in isolation. It was the combination, sustained for a few weeks, that actually got me back into our bedroom for good. I want to underline how ordinary this all sounds, because I think that's exactly why it worked. There was no dramatic before and after, no single breakthrough evening, just 20 minutes with my feet up, a slightly earlier last glass of water, and a short walk most mornings. None of it expensive, none of it complicated, none of it requiring a prescription or a doctor's visit to start. That ordinariness was almost hard to trust at first, honestly, after 18 months of assuming the problem was too big and too permanent to respond to anything this small. The walk in particular became something I looked forward to rather than a chore on a checklist. My wife started joining me most mornings once I moved back into our room, and that walk became its own quiet ritual, separate from anything to do with fixing a problem. Just two people out together before the day got busy. My wife and I spent an entire weekend at our daughter's cabin last month, sharing the same small bedroom the whole time, and there wasn't a single moment of the old calculation. Where's the bathroom? How many steps? Will I wake her? We just slept, the way we used to for 40 years before any of this started. I think about a man named Lester who wrote in, 79, who told me he'd been sleeping in a recliner in his living room for over a year, assuming it was simply kinder to his wife than disturbing her all night. He said learning that the actual cause was fluid sitting in his legs all day, not his bladder failing, felt like being handed a door he hadn't known existed. Lester told me his wife had never once asked him to move out of their bedroom. He'd made that decision alone, quietly, assuming it was what she'd want without ever actually asking her. He said finding out how wrong that assumption was, once he finally talked to her honestly about it, mattered almost as much as the physical fix itself. He told me the conversation itself was harder than anything about the actual habit change. 50 years of marriage, and he'd never once directly told her he was scared of disturbing her sleep. He'd just quietly acted on that fear without ever naming it out loud. Once he finally did, she told him she'd assumed for months he simply didn't want to be close to her anymore, which was so far from the truth it nearly broke his heart to hear. That conversation, more than the leg elevation or the fluid timing, was what actually repaired things between them. The physical fix made it possible to move back into the room. The honest conversation was what made the room feel like theirs again. Lester said he wished someone had told him years earlier that silence, however well-intentioned, tends to get misread as something far worse than the truth ever was. If you're on medication for your heart, your blood pressure, or fluid retention specifically, please hear this clearly. Nothing here replaces your treatment, and you should never stop or change a medication on your own, especially a diuretic. Mention any new habit to your doctor, particularly if you're managing a heart or kidney condition. What I want you to walk away with is this. Nighttime urination often has nothing to do with the bladder failing. It has to do with where fluid sits in your body hours before you ever lie down. I think about how many nights we lost to an assumption neither of us ever tested out loud, that separate rooms was simply the next chapter, rather than a solvable problem hiding behind a much earlier moment in the day. 18 months isn't a small stretch at our age. It's a real, countable fraction of however many years we have left together, spent apart for a reason that turned out to have nothing to do with either of us failing the other. I try not to dwell on that loss too much, but I won't pretend it doesn't cross my mind, especially on the good nights now, lying next to her, remembering how close we came to just accepting the distance as permanent. At our age, you start counting things differently. Not in decades anymore, but in the actual number of nights you might still get. and I don't intend to waste another one of them down the hall. So here's what I use: a few drops every single morning. And let me be honest about why it works. One herb on its own nudges one thing, but your prostate answers best when several signals are calmed at the same time: the flow, the emptying, the pressure behind it. That's why what I take brings them together, concentrated, working as one, not a single ingredient hoping to do everything. Stronger stream, full emptying, quiet nights, your freedom back. And none of the trade-offs, no dizziness, no dry finish, nothing taken from you as a man. It's linked right under this video. Go see it for yourself. It won't replace good sleep or your own doctor. It's there to support your body. At 83, I sleep through. It is not too late for you. I think about the man I was, quietly retreating to a guest room and calling it kindness. And I think about the man I am now, back in our bed every single night. That's not vanity. That's dignity. Being present with the person you love instead of managing a problem from a separate room. If you've ever quietly pulled away from someone you love, assuming it was the kinder thing to do, tell me about it in the comments. And if this kind of honest, specific explanation is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this ahead every single week, and I genuinely read every comment myself, even the quiet ones that just say, "Us too."